some of the, let's say creative decisions that you had taken vis-a-vis the iconography, for instance, and let's say aesthetic that went into some of the image production and things like that. Your decision for the title, Portal. The portal is, of course, originally considered to be a two-way kind of communication channel. That kind of idea works quite nicely with your publication. It's a voice from the past, but it's also about, our interventions.
To be very frank, before I applied for the grant, I didn't think of a title for quite a few months that I was working. But when I wrote the proposal and then I started to find a title, and I am usually a fan of single word titles. It's a communication channel between two different sort of spatio-temporal realities.
But there are various sort of interests that become portals also within the book. For instance, the epistolary format, the letter writing, the sort of journal entries and the letter writing. Maybe you can give a sense of some of the literary decisions you were taking regarding your voice. You as an individual within the book, you were sort of encountering the archive itself. You sort of following the tracks of Achintya, and then of course his understanding of who these various individuals were, Rita and others. So maybe the portal question is more about process.
See, originally it was my intention to make a collection that would leave only threads of different stories in one container. Like each of these individual stories would be incomplete if I were to present you with a fruit bowl, which has like slices of different fruit in it. You pick one and you eat one, you get just the taste of one fruit, but it's not enough to get an encompassing idea about it. If I am not talking about only the photographs and the photographers, but as you said, the journal writing, the writing of letters, the pages from fictional books, pages from autobiography, pages from a research-oriented book, a personal letter, and a business letter, the script of a advertisement. So all these different kinds of writing, individually, they do not give you much of an idea about themselves. If you were to pick up that thread and then proceed further, then maybe the viewer would find that each of these things belong to different classes of their own. Even when I was trying to write construct a letter that would accompany a photograph, I didn't want to copy from an already existing letter, but I would read a collection of them and then make a certain idea about what I'm going to write, and I'll just take the mood.
The studio space also becomes a portal in that respect. You walk into it because they became sort of spaces in which we engaged in, something that was imaginary. Your interest in archives seems to be very, very present and clear in this publication. Your position on what it means to create a repository, your position on the voice that goes into the construction of a new narrative. How do you think an archive that might be historical, part historical, finds voice and resonance today? It gives you sort of very productive ways of thinking about how archives become human, after all. They give us a dimension on our own interpersonal exchanges and practices.
In 21st century, what I feel like that, especially in this particular decade, the so-called art world's interest in visual archives, audio archives, or archives in general has been quite prominent. I think the importance of an archive is doesn't only lie on the content of the archive, but also how the content is being consumed by the present audience. If the same archive is accessed by an artist in 1990s, for example, and an artist in 2010s, for an example. So both of these artists would have had not only the archive as their working material, but also the baggage of their own time, the perception of their time to carry forward the content into something else, something new. So I've been noticing for the past few years that now that the lived memory of living under Soviet Union is not present among the young people, so there is a huge upsurge in the interest a huge upsurge in like Soviet arts and Soviet architecture in popular Western media in the last few years. So since they don't have a lived memory of living under the Cold War era, so all they rely on is the archival material now that they get. If the same person would have been born in 1970s and would have like looked at the same archive in the 1990s, the burden of their times would like compel them to think of the same artistic material or the same archival material in a different light than what they are doing now.
How a certain history is remembered, especially one that is forgotten, and especially one that actually only allows us to have access to it through something contemporary. The whole period of modernism, in which, of course, with the workers' photography movement and other socialist impulses, Russia, of course, played a pivotal role, and it did so also in the context of exhibitionary practice. It did so by making these large propaganda kind of exhibitions. And this was followed through quite distinctly by exhibitions such as The Family of Man that came to India in the 1950s. It also came to Calcutta. I almost thought that there was an eye to that intermedia, sensibility that went into the book.
Well, I certainly thought of putting the similar ideas out in a three-dimensional vertical space, or maybe in a gallery space or a public space. There are two challenges that I am trying to work on currently. The book gives you a structure which can simulate a linear narrative. You start with a certain set of information, and then you follow a line, and then at the end you end with more information than you originally had. So how to effectively impart that knowledge into a three-dimensional space. And the second would be the information that you get from this book doesn't rely on audience's infatuation with the material. Like you can see the scotch tape, you can see the markings of the paper clips, but you cannot really touch it. So the whole idea would be a simulation of a material, but not the material itself. Like if you could touch and hold the newsprint, then I think the value of the simulation is lost. How to bypass this need of seeing a real material, yet impart the same amount of wonder that a viewer gets from the content.
Were there competing formats, for instance, that you had thought about? I mean, we've arrived at this one, and I was asking this the last time, this format, this size, and so on. But was there, in an arriving point to this, competing formats and competing ideas that you have for the form this publication could take?
I was looking at different books and albums and archives to 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 take a reference from in general. So I particularly am a fan of two books, which I think I reference the most in terms of the arriving at a design and structure. One is Juan Foncuberta's Fauna, and the other is Roberto Bolaño's novel The Savage Detectives. So I think these are the two books that I lifted ideas from the most. In terms of the book would have a definite first person driven initial random collection of collectibles, and the third portion would be again a first person account of a certain kind of failure to make sense of that collection.
Who were some of the people who helped you in designing the book and giving it its current form?
My friend who posed for all the pictures, Poroma. So she and Shombodip are the two chief collaborators. And I've had the pleasure of having so many friends contributing in this production by appearing as characters, by lending clothes, by writing some of the documents and stuff, because obviously I'm not a writer, so I can't mimic so many people's writing style. So I wrote the general content, and I asked some of my friends to use their linguistic variations to create different parts of it. And then my friend Gargi, who translated the whole thing, and she also contributed in some of the handwritings. So Vivan Sundaram would give very pinpoint and very precise criticisms about the things that were developing, and I ended up implementing most of them. My interests are esoteric, right? I take things from one thing and try to mix it with something else. I try to put more substantiality into it by taking information from a different kind of culture, from a different maybe coexisting but parallel. So I just wanted to keep the references somehow belong to a cultural and historical canon, but loose enough to remain an absolutely fictional existence as well.